Today we're going to visit the neighborhood food store with the Nelsons. There's plenty of parking space where Mrs. Nelson... Jack and Betty are going along to help their mother. Chipper's going along too. Open for Chipper. Health laws don't allow dogs in food stores. Poor Chipper. Jack has a shopping list of what they've decided to buy. Soup, fruit juice, meat, vegetables, fruit, milk, butter, eggs, and bread. Jack is going to take care of the shopping basket for his mother. Betty sees a little basket just her size. She decides to do some shopping of her own. This big store keeps each kind of food in a different department. This is the canned foods department. 3 cans of string beans are first to go into the basket. Many kinds of foods are put up in cans to keep them from spoiling. Vegetables, fruits, milk, meat, and fish, to name only a few. Soup is the next thing the Nelsons want to buy. Betty has found something she likes too, a big can of peaches. She thinks she's going to surprise her mother. Jack chooses 2 cans of tomato soup and 2 cans of vegetable. They are his favorite soups. This is one of the boys who works in the food store. He stamps the prices on the cans and puts them on the shelves. Others, in a room behind the store, are doing work like weighing out bags of onions. They wrap ears of corn in plastic, which they seal on a hot plate. Foods for the store to sell are delivered every day by big trucks. The boxes go to an upstairs storeroom until they're needed. It takes many people to run a food store. Jack asks where the fruit juice is kept. That was on the shopping list. He buys a large bottle of apple juice. Mrs. Nelson has found a bargain, some cans of tuna fish. Today it is cheaper to buy 3 cans at one time. The meat department is the next stop. In this store, the meat is already cut and put out in counters. The meat is wrapped in clear plastic so that shoppers can see what they're buying. Chickens are wrapped in clear plastic too. Mrs. Nelson chooses 2 pounds of hamburger meat. She wants a veal roast too for Sunday dinner. The ones in the counter are not big enough for the Nelsons and their guests. Mr. Engel, the butcher, is glad to cut one for her. The store keeps meat in a special room where it will stay cold. Mr. Engel needs a sharp knife to cut the meat. He uses a saw to cut the bone. To cut through large bones, Mr. Engel has a band saw, which is run by a motor. He cuts the meat so that it will fit a roasting pan. Now he must weigh the roast. It's 5.5 pounds. Mrs. Nelson thinks it's a very nice roast. It will taste good for Sunday dinner. While Mrs. Nelson has been buying meat, Betty has found something too. Some food for Chipper. Half gallon is 2 quarts. The Nelsons need butter and eggs too. Butter comes in pounds and quarter pounds. Eggs are sold by the dozen and half dozen. There are many kinds of cheeses too. The Nelsons get a pound of butter and a dozen eggs. The fruit and vegetable department is next. Mr. Donalds is in charge of this department. He gets fresh fruits and vegetables every day. He puts them out so that people can see them. Each kind is in a separate place. Mrs. Nelson wants some apples, and Mr. Donalds is ready to help. Jack wants some strawberries, but Mrs. Nelson thinks they're too expensive today. Mrs. Nelson chooses some nice apples, and Mr. Donalds weighs them for her. He writes the price on a slip of paper and attaches it to the bag. Mrs. Nelson will pay the cashier later. Betty has found one of her favorite vegetables, a bag of carrots. She still thinks she's going to surprise her mother. Now the frozen foods are next. There are many, many kinds. Frozen orange juice is one thing on the shopping list. They buy 3 cans. Many of the frozen foods are already cooked and need only to be heated to be ready to eat. Betty loves to look at the frozen foods. There's frozen fish, frozen meats, and even frozen turkeys ready for roasting. There are many kinds of frozen vegetables. Mrs. Nelson buys 2 packages of frozen peas. Another part of the store carries dry foods, like flour and cake mixes. There are noodles, macaroni, and spaghetti. There are dried vegetables, like peas and beans. There are dried fruits, like raisins, prunes, and dates. But the Nelsons have everything on their shopping list except bread. They buy 2 loaves. Jack looks at the list and makes sure they haven't forgotten anything. Yes, everything is there. Betty is looking for a box of crackers. Now the Nelsons are ready to pay for their groceries. There are several cashiers, but all are busy just now. The Nelsons will have to wait in line for a few minutes. Many people in the neighborhood buy food here. Each buys the kind of food the family needs and enjoys. Now it's Mrs. Nelson's turn. She puts the foods she's bought on the counter, and the cashier checks them one by one. The cash register shows what each one costs. And now it's Betty's time to surprise her mother. Everyone thinks Betty has played a good joke on her mother. She's done a fine job of shopping. So Betty's things are checked off too. The cash register tells how much Mrs. Nelson must pay. She's paying for Betty's things too. The cashier gives Mrs. Nelson her change. Then she puts the food into large bags. Mrs. Nelson and Jack will carry them to their car. It hasn't taken the Nelsons long to do their shopping, but Chipper is very glad that they're back. When they get home, Mrs. Nelson will prepare the foods they have bought into meals for her family.